Hi, everyone, and good morning if you're dialing in from Australia, New Zealand. Good afternoon if you're dialing in from North America, and good evening if you're dialing in from the UK and Europe. And welcome to today's webinar where we'll be exploring what exactly exec teams need from people leaders in 2024. So my name is Rudy Crous. A bit of background about me. I'm the CEO, co-founder, and corporate psychologist here at Compono, and it's my privilege to be your host today and co-present this webinar. So over the last 18 years, I've helped hundreds of people leaders build high-performing teams and high-performing businesses by proactively aligning their people and their people strategies to their business goals. In fact, I've liked it so much, I've built Compono, a software company, to make achieving that much easier through our proprietary tech. So some of this tech will be available for you today at the end of this webinar, but only if you stick around, so make sure you do. But enough about that for now. Today, we have the absolute honor of being joined by Mr. Bob Schwartz, all the way from sunny California. G'day, Bob. Thanks for being here today and hanging out with us.
Good morning, Rudy, and thanks for the invite. It's good to be here.
Now, Bob, I was trying to figure out how best to introduce you to our audience. As you know, you've had such an incredible and stellar career spanning many decades, not saying how old you are. But I think my monologue would have taken too much time to get through all your amazing experiences. So instead, what I did was I found this clip online about two girls introducing, you might remember this, introducing you on stage in Australia as a keynote speaker. And I thought, you know what? These girls summed it up pretty darn well. So without me explaining who and what you are, I'm going to roll this clip if that's okay. Okay, let me share my screen.
Mr. Bob Schwartz has done a lot of stuff with business and is a really cool dude. He founded Nordstrom.com, which Mum says sells fancy pants stuff. He's on the board of Marketplacer, who make marketplaces. Apparently, marketplaces are so hot right now. He was president of Magento. Apparently, you might have heard of it. There's a bunch more, but it'll take us too long to read. He's come all the way from California to be here. Dad said there's good mountain biking and surfing in California, but also mountain lions, so I'm not sure if I want to go there. Anyway, please welcome Mr. Bob Schwartz.
Those girls were, that was a surprise. And when Jen Geel had her two daughters show up to introduce me, it was based on something that we together as co-hosts had done at that event a year before. But that was so terrific. What I have to tell you, Rudy, is you're pushing the limit here. You got hundreds of HR chief people officers on, and you start out within the first minute. I'm going to introduce you by, you remember that video with two girls? Like, you had me sweating, you had your audience sweating. They were all taking notes, ready to turn me in.
Well, I think, ladies and gentlemen, you won't be disappointed. As you can see, we're in for a real treat today. We're going to have a lot of fun. But I do just want to put your minds at ease. Even though Bob is from the US, this session is very relevant for all our people leaders in Australia and New Zealand, as Bob has vast experience working here in our own backyard. Apart from being on the board of Marketplace, as you saw in that video, and a few others that weren't mentioned in the video, Bob has actually been grilling me and my co-founder Carl for the last 10 years, asking us the tough questions about Compono and why we started the business and how we're changing the world of work. So clearly, Australia's had a long love relationship with you, Bob. So again, welcome to you and looking forward to our chat.
Well, you know, Rudy, you may know just from our dialogues, and Carl from his dialogues. It's one of the things I do. You know, I've been really fortunate in my my journey to have you know, had without. I'm not a broad investor. I pick certain companies. I look at my life as a journey, not as jobs. I'm usually with a company, whether I'm all in like Magento or Nordstrom or something, or whether it's I'm on the board and active with a company like Commando or Marketplacer or W Promote, etc. I look at it as this journey, right? I'm supposed to take it from here to here to here. And I've had, 10 companies that we've grown over that time or during that time that have led to billions of dollars of revenue, billions of dollars of acquisition and value and et cetera. But I have to tell you, two things happen. Number one, I ask founders like you, I ask hard questions, and you'll usually give me the answer that the world expects. Like, oh, well, it's because, but I ask why. And I probably ask 5 layers of why to drill down harder and further on it. And the other part I was going to.
Oh, I know.
Yes, enough to get the sweat going. The other thing I do, which starts to speak to why we're here, is my metrics. Even though I've had a very fortunate career journey in building companies, probably my best metrics are not, gee, we sold for hundreds of millions or billions, or the value we created was this or this. But I'll give you an example. My brand, what I'm all about, is about enabling the success of others. And number one, when you think about this audience we're talking to, if that is not what they're supposed to be doing, enabling the success of the teams and of the company, it's spot on. But my favorite metrics are, like with Magento, it's not that, it's now Adobe Commerce, but my favorite metric was probably 1 million people wake up every day and make a living because Magento exists. I just freaking love that metric. The other one, a recent one, I was on the board for 12 years of a not-for-profit called Good 360, of which we birthed one in Australia, which is doing really well over there. But, we went from kind of being a starving, not sure if we could pay our team year over year when I was there 12 years ago, to now we are the second largest not-for-profit in America. And we distribute, this is the metric, over $3 billion of goods last year. That's a lot for, so those are the kind of metrics that get me excited, but it's all about enabling the success of others, which is kind of what the core of the talent that we're talking about today is about.
Brilliant. Well, Bob, hold your horses. Before we dive in, I do have a couple of housekeeping items, and then we'll go straight into the conversation and we'll get excited. So I think, guys, just firstly, of the housekeeping items, we will run a Q&A session towards the end. We'll have a bit of a 35-40-minute discussion with Bob, and we'll go into Q&A. And then secondly, we will make available for free our Compono business performance and alignment tool and platform, worth many thousands of dollars to participants today. I don't know who approved this at Compono, only joking, but look, it is pretty exciting. This tool will give you insights in terms of how your business is performing today and how your work environment is working today versus how you might want to adapt to achieve your organization's objectives. And you can use these insights then to take it back to your executive team. And so what it'll give you towards the end is a link and a QR code that you can sign up for this free tool and get using. We do have some great videos, onboarding videos that'll help you to get started. So, okie dokie. Householding done and dusted, Bob. So we can really dive into it if you're ready.
I'm ready. Hey, Rudy, how long do you think we're going to be doing this?
Well, we'll probably go for about 35 minutes, and then we'll dive into Q&A.
Let's go at it.
Okay, cool. So look, I think you've already started with it. I've known you for a pretty long time, but I think it would be quite valuable for our audience if you can give us a little bit more background and insight into your career, how you first started, and how you got to where you are now with holding numerous executive and board positions at some of the world's largest companies. How did that go for you?
Whoa, I think I jumped the gun, and I touched on some of that stuff earlier. But you know what? I was actually just to frame it up, because this audience has chief people officers and HR leaders. They go into the psyche of the people who are there. So I'll tell you, I was going to university for me was a time when Wall Street was gold and it was roaring, and I always thought business is my sport, and so I became a Wall Street guy out of university. And I was there 3 years doing pretty well, financially doing pretty well, but I I just thought, you know what, making money on money, moving money, just I need to make something. I love the smart people and et cetera, but I needed to make something. And to cut to the chase, I was involved in building a financial insurance business that was scaling really quickly just after that. And we needed this new thing called technology to help us to scale because we were just growing so quickly. And I had to work on a project, and it was all new. And I'm up in Seattle, and Microsoft is there, and I'm having these conversations. I'm like, these guys in technology are smart, they're witty, they're quick, just like the Wall Street guys. Every time a problem comes up, they dive in and solve it, but they're actually creating a product. I'm like, I got to do that. I learned. I then dove into a failing early stage company just so I could get some experience. I taught myself to code. And the kind of the surf that brought me along was, I'm at the end of the day, you know, now I've got decades of operational experience, and I've done all the different jobs out there. But my superpower, my magic is, it's really culture, it's brand, and it's marketing, all kind of done differently, and except, you know, with the idea of not just the same, got to do it different. And along the way, I with the marketing mindset, I found some products and started selling them online before the internet was there, on the commercial online systems like Prodigy and CompuServe. And the internet came along, and I was selling. I coded up a new site and started selling PCs online, and just started to grow it from there. And that led to one thing, another, and Nordstrom, selling a company at Amazon, and Nordstrom coming knocking at my door to help them launch and build and scale Nordstrom.com. And it was good. I'm really a curious guy. I just like what I do, and I like learning. And technology has been just a blessing for me. Brilliant.
Well, yeah. I do have a bit of a cheeky question before I dive into a little bit more of, you know, you started talking about your purpose and what's really important for you, but I do have a bit of a cheeky question for you. I don't know if you saw, but this week, Jeff Bezos overtook Elon Musk as the world's richest man. Yes. Now, as I remember, you were once called and asked by Jeff to come and join his little-known startup, Amazon. What was the story there, and do you have any regrets?
Yeah, if I wish I, etc. I was selling PCs online, and Jeff moved into town and up in Seattle. And I was at a cocktail party. There were probably 25, 30 of us. Just a good friend of mine was having a party. And I met Jeff and Mackenzie, his wife, and we started talking. I said, you know, I'm selling computers online. I started doing it on Prodigy, and now I've got a website up. And he had just moved into town. And when I say selling online, the cheat was I had an 800 number, so I'm not transacting online. People are calling me. So think of it as a catalog on the internet. And we started to talk about it. And Jeff and Mackenzie said, hey, you know, let's get together. And I think it was a week or two later, we had lunch. I met the 12, maybe 15 employees he had. And he and Mackenzie took me out to lunch. And they said, hey, we need a head of marketing. Would you do that? And if you're young and you're on this call, you may not remember that back in the good old days of startups, you got a lot of stock and you got very, 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 very little compensation, And he kind of laid that out to me, and I kind of had to say, you know, Jeff, I can't afford to take that deal. I have a wife, I got 2 kids, I got a house, I got a car, I got all this stuff in place. And now when I say I can't afford to do it, Jesus, I could have owned the other half of Seattle or the other half of the nation if I stayed. But that said, truth is, would I have kept the stock? Would I have sold it along the way? And me, I know I'm a journey guy from point A to point B. Somewhere along the way, I would have looked up and said, you know, in fact, like I said later on, I sold a company like a couple years later. We sold a company to Amazon, and it was a founder-driven company, and I got involved with it, and we sold it to Amazon and made some money. But I'm like, yeah, no, I don't want to go to a big company like Amazon. And the only reason I ended up at Nordstrom, aside from a bunch of other things, is they literally mapped it as a journey for me. Just give us 2 to 3 years, 6 months at a time, build us, do this, and we'll treat you as founder and you can leave. So I get anxious when I get pinned down for too long. So I don't know. I may not have stayed with Jeff that long anyway. That said, if he started SpaceX, rockets are cool. That would have been a cool thing.
Well, I like your story about Wall Street and talking about your purpose and the journey. Whenever you talk about business, whenever you introduce yourself, you always talk about you're in the business of building good businesses. What exactly does that mean? Do you have any relevant examples of where that's gone good, where it's gone not so good, and how did those businesses that you've experienced get back on track?
I got a lot of those examples, but what I'll say is I'm in the business of building businesses, and it's not just I filter pretty hard when I'm a little bit from that standpoint, like a investor, a private equity or venture investor, in that I've got an interesting amount of opportunities that come to me, and I filter pretty hard because I'm looking for culture, brand, founder, leader, and that accepts or deeply understands that those things are really the magic that's going to separate you from everything else. And so, I've always looked at all these as journeys, although these journeys, there's journeys where I've been all in, Nordstrom, Magento, et cetera. There's journeys when I've been on the board and very active, like Tamando or Marketplacer or W Promote, which is a digital agency. We grew from 50 people to 800, and it's one of the leaders here in the United States. It's just, and its driver, the thing I'm most proud about W Promote is its culture. And maybe, if we get time, I'll share something about that. But to me, it's when I say I like to build good companies, it's about finding the ones that I can add the most outsized value to. And the way I do it isn't just being there, but it's, do I think they really need me? And will they accept what I'm talking about? That, they say, there's an old saying that the 3 most important things to build a successful company is, number 1, great execution. Number 2, great execution. And number 3, great execution. And they're not wrong. They're not wrong at all. But if that's all you do, you're just going to be, and you're an up-and-comer, you're just going to be part of the noise. So the magic is, yes, you have to execute really well if you're a growth company or a startup or trying to take on a new market. But if that's all you do, you're just like everybody else, and you're never going to break out. And the bigger guys, you'll never get ahead. So you're never going to win because the bigger guys are executing really well too. And so you're just part of the noise. I'll even jump that further, Rudy, is when I was at Nordstrom, I signed up to do that, and I thought, mine to lose. Here I've got a Fortune 500 company. Its name is really known. Its brand, probably one of its biggest brand aspect is trust. And when you're talking about people first learning to buy things online, trust was probably the single most important thing. It was mine to lose. But that said, Macy's was going online, Neiman's was going online, other department stores were going online. So I'm thinking about this. I'm like, well, I can do a good job. I can make sure we go online really well, and execute really well. But then I'm just part of the noise. And so how do I do things differently? So we decided what we would do is we launched NordstromShoes.com, the world's biggest shoe store. And we did a 3-tier supply chain model that I had learned in the computer industry from hanging out with Dell and watching Dell. And we had over 20 million pairs of shoes online available when we launched. And that was epic. And what I didn't really realize is that shoes are an epic thing. I knew it. I was a shoe salesman for Nordstrom when I was in college. But wow, I couldn't believe, the whole idea was, if we just said Nordstrom.com, the world goes, department store online. We say NordstromShoes.com, the world's biggest shoe store. People are like, wait, I got to come see that. And by seeing that and getting excited about it, that lightning bolt sticks in their head. They got to go see it. They got to act on it. And from there, they'll find everything else. So even with Nordstrom, doing the things it wasn't about just great execution. We had to do something different to actually win. Now, if we didn't do anything different, we would have been okay anyway. But this, we won awards. We won the Red Herring Top 100 Most Important Companies in the World Award. We had better traction with customers. We got, there was a lot that we did. And we were looked at as the department's, the leader in the United States from a digital standpoint at that time.
And so what was, if you think about brand and culture and you think about our audience here, what was the role that HR or people leaders played in building that? What do you think they did really well?
So everything I'm talking about and have said so far is spot on for this conversation. And it's unique. Rudy asked me to do this. I'm like, chief people HR. Now I actually, in between one of my deals, I actually entertained being the chief people for one of the organizations. It was a new mobile phone organization here in the United States, or actually it was international. And I really give it some serious thought. But I opted not to do it because the world wasn't, they were ready. They wanted it. They wanted a leader, but the world wasn't thinking this way. But today, I think the framework today is set up for it. And here's where I'm going with this. When you ask me to do this, I'm like, I love this business. I love the people that I know that are in the middle of this business. Like, Megan over W Promote, she and I are created a great bond. She's chief HR over there and just done a beautiful job. Kelly at Marketplace, or Lars, who was at Magento. I love the business. I think it's a great place to be. But there's remember when we talked about the most important thing is great execution, great execution, great execution. Absolutely. With it, there's so much noise and so much stuff to do. You got to execute really well on that. But same thing for chief people officers, HR. If that's all you do, you're just part of the noise. And it's just, and so as I was thinking about how do I, Bob Schwartz, have a conversation with all these important talent people out there, have a conversation, and what can I really say? It's no different. You need to execute really, really, really well as a head of people, because there's a lot of motion going on. In fact, I'll put a pin in that and get back to that. But you got to do things differently. And with my companies, a lot of times it's things like, when I say do things differently, it's things like a manifestation you would think of culture is, and I hate to say this because I know it's all well-meaning, are those posters on the wall that either have a mission statement that the whole team got together and you thought you were done, then Sally raises her hand and goes, honesty. We need to get honesty in there. And okay, we're done now. And then Joe comes in and goes, no, we need driven. And all of a sudden it gets done, and it's kind of meaningless, kind of washed out by the time you get it. Or you have your values on the wall and a poster, and that's okay. But to me, people can't wake up and be led by that. It's meaningless. So this is where I have questions. Like I'll give Mike Mothner as an example. Mike Mothner is the founder of W Promote. He started in college. When I met him, he had 35 people. And Ad Age, our magazine, was already saying it was one of the top 100 ad agencies to work for in the United States from a cultural standpoint. And I'm like, Mike, you started this in college. Why was that important to you? He goes, people are really important. I think, talent is really important. I'm like, Mike, you were in college. You didn't know that. How? Why did this happen? And I asked him 5 times, why? Finally, he looks at me, he goes, dang. He used a different word, but he goes, dang. He goes, I just didn't want my Mondays to suck. I wanted my Mondays to suck a little less. And he goes, so I needed to go a place that I wanted to go to. And so I decided I have to do that. I go, that's it. It's going to be W Promote. Our tag's going to be make Mondays suck less. And that will inform our team every time they walk in the door that our job as leaders is to make Mondays suck less for all the talent. The talent does it for each other. And we all are there for our customer. When the client walks in the door Monday, his Monday sucks less because he knows W Promote is on his side, or she knows W Promote is on her side. And the reason I bring this all up is again, going back to HR, execution, really, really, really important, especially in that business. You can't screw some of that stuff up. You got legal issues, you got financial issues, you've got all kinds of things. But you still need to do things different. And I contend those well-meaning things on the wall are fine, but they're not doing the job. And when it gets down to manifesting your mission and manifesting, maybe it's a tagline like, to us from Magento, it was enable the e-commerce ecosystem success, which meant you come in, your single job was to make the ecosystem more successful than we ever will be. And again, because we knew it was an ecosystem play. Make it grow, we will grow. So with HR, I would say, with HR and talent, the same way I build businesses, they should be a partner of mine in executing on that. But again, it's got to be unique statements, got to be different and set aside. The great execution part, and now you got me going because I got a bunch of notes right here on my screen. You can't see them, Rudy. The great execution, I was giving this some thought, and I thought, you know what, Rudy? How do I say this? And I know this isn't going to happen overnight for all the people on the call. But if I was a CEO and a board member, all that great execution is important. But in some sense, one output in my mind was payroll, right? And payroll and some of the other benefits, some of those things that naturally fall in HR and end up taking up 90% of your time. I'm not saying outsource it, but if you could, and I don't quite mean this, but if you could, hear me out, if you could give it to the COO or give it to the CFO, and you be on the side of the table of the CEO and the board, and you look at how well it's doing, et cetera. I need a partner as a leader, as a board member, that I trust is doing the right things for the org. And we'll talk about this more, but it's like I knew the internet was going to be big because I was already selling things online. It was obvious. And from that point on, I told everybody, learn to code, learn to do HTML, and et cetera. Today, I tell every kid I see, start playing with AI and work from anywhere. Those two huge waves are going to change organizations. It's the HR, I don't even like using the word HR, but it's chief people and talent officers that have got to are now being put in a huge value creation role and opportunity to help the boards and help the CEOs understand what that's going to look like. And I don't think it should be reactive. I think it should be proactive. So I'm saying, I know the only way you can do that is to offload or distance yourself a little bit. I'm not saying get all the way away from benefits, all the way away from payroll. I'm saying put it over there, let it execute really well, hold it accountable. Hold that CEO or that CFO or COO accountable to it in essence, or whoever's running it. But give yourself time because the organizations need somebody, and the CEOs and board need somebody to figure this out because nobody's got it perfect right now. We don't know what we don't know, how it's all going to change organizations.
I think it's interesting, right? Because what you're essentially talking about is getting away from just being serial processes of information to leading, right? And I think what we've seen is that has been a huge gap, right? Organizations are really, really good at every year, every financial year, we put up our fiscal goals, our revenue targets, and then magically that needs to happen. I think this has been the disconnect for me is HR, a lot of the times what we see is they are really eager, really keen to drive the culture, make it a better place to work, but it doesn't consider how that aligns back to the organization's objectives. So the way we think about it is there's kind of leading and lagging indicators. A lagging indicator obviously is your revenue. A leading indicator is your organization designed in the right way? Is your work environment designed in the right way to actually drive that? And I think this is where HR can play a lot more of a strategic way, is to go, okay, this is how we understand the organization's objectives. This is how our organization is designed today. So these are our systems, our processes, our procedures, the way the company works today. Is that actually aligned with where we want to go into the future, right? And I think understanding what that gap is means that HR and people leaders now becomes a lot more strategic rather than just off to the side and say, okay, cool, we expect you to be the custodian of culture, but you kind of just, a cost center to the business. I think this is the mentality that needs to change, is changing the concept of we're a cost center to actually a profit center. And it comes back to the matrices, how you report back to your exec. Right?
That's it. Rudy, you're spot on, because this is, I talk about a value. Everything's a value equation, and maybe it's because I just got math in my mind. I'm an econ major, but everything's a value equation. When you talk about everything, nothing's a singular. If you talk to somebody, and you wanted to grow a company, they may say, hey, I need more revenue, or I need more whatever. It's never singular. It's about, okay, to me, the value equation equals build value. That's to me, and I think it's build value can be a personal thing. I'm going to build value in my life, build value, and value gets into the definition of what do you mean? I'm not talking about valuation. I'm talking about value in this world. And to me, for me, that's usually mid to long-term to really long-term value is what I try to do. So that's over here on the equal sign. Then you got stuff that your business does or you do that are pluses and minuses along the way. And I think I used to talk to my I talked to my son. I got a son who's in the sports media business, and he develops content. He's got a couple sports programs that are online, and he does a lot of stuff. It's a little bit outside of my real world of understanding how to build. But one of the things I talked to him, I said, is you're a cost center if you're just creating content. And if you're just creating content, that's great. But anytime you do that, that's a cost center. HR and people and the whole organization underneath them is, or around them, all their balls of responsibility, benefits, payroll, talent itself, et cetera. It's a cost center in the board's, kind of in the board's mind.
Correct.
Not saying that they don't believe in it, but it's a cost center. And I always told my son, go in and always have whole math conversations. Here's what we're going to do with the creative. I got a show. I got this talent's going to come on. We're going to be on the NBA's line, et cetera, et cetera. And that will finish it off. That we believe that'll drive, 10 million views, which will be worth this kind of capital or money or value to us, or get this kind of engagement for us. But always talk about the whole math, because the people over there, otherwise it's just a cost center. And I think chief HR needs those metrics to be able to walk in with and to speak to.
I think, it's interesting you say that, because HR is typically, one of the least resourced functions of the business. And a big part of it is because it's not necessarily the business or the exec doesn't believe in HR. It is the fact that they see them as cost centers. In Compoto, for example, with my HR team, the reporting is actually quite different. We talk about, okay, if we're hiring X amount of people and we're not using recruiters, how much money did you save the company, right? When we talk about we actually just implemented a couple of years ago a new HRIS. I said to the guys, okay, so instead of just telling me how much the HRIS is going to cost me, tell me how much time you're going to save and how much money that's going to equate to for you to be doing value add stuff, dollar productive stuff, rather than being in spreadsheets. That information I can take to the board. That information I can take to the exec and say, hey, we can keep going the way we're going, but we're not doing dollar productive stuff. And actually, we're wasting a lot of money. Here's what we are doing from a metrics perspective and how much money we're saving the company. Similarly with some of our initiatives, right? We trace it back to essentially what is our turnover or what is our retention, right? How much money are we saving from a retention perspective? So I think simple switch of the mind from HR being seen as the police to HR and a cost center to HR being seen as a critical value add to achieving the business objectives. I'd say that is probably one of the key things that a lot of traditional HR functions need to get their heads across.
Yeah, Rudy, I agree 100%. And again, let's go back to today's world where we sit in in 2024, and we've got the biggest disruptions on organizations that have ever taken place. We had years of COVID that just kicked the cans out of everybody the way we do business, which manifested work from anywhere, which is fine. And I have no problem with it. My problem, and maybe some of I posted on this, is I sat here during COVID and did a lot of these things with my companies. And what I didn't realize is, because it was never obvious, but my muscles and things were atrophying. And it doesn't, you don't see it day to day. But over time, that atrophy happens. And it wasn't until I just got back to the gym a year ago, I'm like, oh my God, everything just feels better, et cetera. You just don't notice it. And I contend it's up to us as leaders, and in particular, chief people and HR leaders. If you really want to, at the end of the day, we're there to help, in my eyes, help the company, but also help the talent grow, right? Help them understand and grow, or be who they are the best they can. Some people I don't want to grow at all. But I contend if they're sitting at home, they're atrophying. They don't realize it. Their talent is atrophying. And some, maybe that's okay. Some may have been in the business 15, 20 years, and they got all the experience they need, and they just don't want to grow anymore, and they can be a lone ranger or have some interaction. But I believe that and I'm not saying everybody's got to be in the office, but I'm saying the people that are listening to us right now need to be the people that are trying to solve for what that looks like, and how to help the talent and help the organization through that. And the other phase to this is AI. AI is going to eat a lot of tasks, and if the companies aren't doing it, they should be looking at using AI. Just any task we do more than 4 times, how do we throw it into the AI machine and have it do the work for us? So people, you don't need to lay people off, perhaps, per se, but people now can elevate the work that they do. But what's that mean? How's that look? What's the organization, if you kind of play out a scenario, today is ground zero, and we start doing this 18 months from now, here's what will have changed, and here's what we can do with those assets, that talent, and deploy them towards this. And so it's the people that are on this call are, if they raise their heads and raise their hands and become leaders versus managers, it's what we need. It's what we need desperately.
I think I'm even going to bring it home closer to our people leaders on the call, right? Because I think traditionally, HR has been transactional, policies, processes, procedures, writing a lot of documentation. I think the next evolution of HR is to become a data experts, right? To be able to, and like you said, AI is data, right? So the ability to get comfortable to understand data and how that data traces back to the organization's objectives and so forth. So I think that is a bit of a mind shift from what you would learn at university, about what HR is. And I think getting a lot more comfortable with using AI, using data, making HR more predictable, and tracking progress, right? I think even if you look at HR tech, it's kind of, when we talk about more of the proactive HR tech, HR is kind of one of the last functions in the business where data has become a really important factor. And I think that's only going to grow and increase. So,
but and I agree with you. I think that, again, they're all tools, and anybody I get in front of, like I used to always say, hey, just take a class or two, or go online and do a class or two of coding, just so you're not afraid of it, because it will be the basis of every business. And this was 20, 30 years ago. It will be the basis of every business. And if you're not afraid of it, you're 3 steps ahead of everybody else. And what Scott Galloway says, Scott's a publisher, author, podcast, or whatever it is, he's a very talented guy that's been around these same generations I have. I remember when he started his for his company. But Galloway said, I love what he said. He said, you're more likely, you're less likely to lose your job to AI than you are to lose your job to somebody who knows AI, right? And I would implore everybody on this call, if you're not playing with Google's or chat, it's easy, play with it. For me, it's like having a little MBA, a little grad student over here, and I feed it stuff and it spits out, oh my God, and it gets you going and et cetera. Is it perfect? No, but it's that kind of, it's gotten you off the ground, and then you can tweak it and add your value to it later. But just play with it, get to know it. So because it's going to change all our companies, just like the internet did. And just like, I remember, okay, I'll go back in 1998, I was at National NRF, big show in New York, Javits, thousands of people on, kind of in the audience, and it's retail's big show. And I was brought up as, here's the internet guy doing internet-y things online for Nordstrom. And we had I had literally just started there, so we weren't fully online. But I remember going on stage, and everybody in the audience had these old clunky push button remotes, and they could vote A, B, or C on different questions. I'll never forget. Are you ever going online? Yes. No, not in about a year to 2 years. Never. You cannot believe the amount of nevers and sometime maybe. We're in the same place with AI, and the people here, again, when you asked me to do this, I'm like, and it really hit me really hard that I understand most of the people's jobs on this call are 99% executional and 1%, and I'm being dramatic, 1% strategic. I think it's time to look at the organization, say, the organization of the organization, and talent, and how we manage all that has always been important. But now we're taking on attacks, and not negative, but we're taking on change, and we're taking on change from work from anywhere. We're taking on change from AI. I need a leader that can manifest and think ahead, because what's the CEO going to do? He's going to Google around, he's going to listen to a podcast, and everybody on this call knows he's going to come in every month or so and go, I heard on a podcast we should be flat. I heard on a podcast we should be organizational,
hierarchical.
You all should be taking care of that, not them. In Rudy, do you have in Australia the show Billions?
Yeah.
Okay, do you remember if I said Wendy Rhodes? She was the brunette. She was right. She was the HR person for the PE firm though.
Yeah, I can't think of the name, but yes.
The hedge fund. I loved her. I thought, now again, she was a little bit, myopic on her, revenue, but she was, to me, I see aspects of that for what we're talking about there. Be a partner to the CEO, and your job is talent. And when I say talent, I'm not talking about employees. I am, but the word talent, and how do we mature talent? How do we get talent, to perform best? How do we organize the best way? And she does that, and she is there to get performance out of the talent. And I just think that that's the model. I think is a strong one.
Bob, I think I've got a ton of questions actually, but you've actually come to the crux of, I think, what I want to get to today as well. Chris, did you want to throw up our slides here? So, guys, whilst Chris is throwing this up, please throw up some of your Q&A questions. I know we could have kept talking for a ton of time more, but as I said at the start, we do have an offer where we're exactly making what Bob was talking about free for all of our participants. So what we've got here is our component proprietary tool that allows you to essentially evaluate your work environment, your culture, understanding how your company works today versus how it potentially needs to evolve based on your organization's objectives. So it's always tying back to the organization's goals and looking to understand where there's gaps and using that information to either drive change and communicate that back to your executive, or, as Bob said, bring the right people into the business. So what you can do with this technology basically is identify the key criteria or key characteristics that you're looking for new employees versus how your work environment needs to evolve over time. So it's a great tool to look for that alignment and or misalignment. It's for free, sign up. There's the QR code. So scan the QR code and our customer success team will help you on board. And some of those videos, onboarding videos, are of course available online for you to look at as well. So I encourage all of you, if you enjoyed the call, if you're looking to drive further change and align with your exec, as Bob was talking about, this is a great way for you to add value, talk about being proactive, and talk about the profit center as opposed to just purely a cost center. So Bob, we'll jump into some Q&A right now. Like I said, I'll still have a ton of questions, but I think we might have to have another session. So I might throw over to Chris and see if, yeah.
Can you hear me, Rudy?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Well, and maybe we do it on the way out, but how do I say it? I eat my own dog food. So, and I'm not going to go through this right now, but I think this, maybe I'll get it to you and you guys can distribute it out to the, but I went into ChatGPT and actually I went into Google's, and I like Google's answers, but I asked it, I kind of asked it the question of what we were talking about. Hey, today's HR looks this way. I think tomorrow we're going here. What would you call them? What, and I got it, and give me a couple lines on what they would do. And then the last question is, I said, write me a paragraph that I would use for marketing and recruiting to post on what this job is. And I got to tell you, number one, it's proof of using ChatGPT, but if you see these things in print, I'll send them out, or we can talk about it if we have more time. It really speaks to what you and I are talking about. It's about them being a partner, going through these waves of change that are going on right now and getting metrics like what you're talking about doing.
Awesome. No, definitely send it through. Like I said, we can always have another session. Chris, do we have any questions in the Q&A?
Yeah, we do. Great session, Bob and Rudy. Really, really enjoyable. We do have some time for questions, maybe 2 or 3. The first one here is from Helma, who's a CPO in the logistics space. She asks, is it's still really hard to find and keep good people with unemployment still relatively low? Are there any new methods or practices we should be adopting in our hiring process to improve our ability to connect with candidates?
I might jump in there, Bob, if you don't mind. What we actually saw, especially over the COVID period, is a lot of our customers were moving beyond just employees needing to be within the 5-kilometer or 5-mile radius of their office. So what we actually saw is a huge uptake to more remote workers where possible, of course, and looking for how we can attract or how they can attract employees globally. Some of the limitations we did see, or some of the criteria we did see, is making sure that if you do go and search offshore employees, you still have to maintain them within a certain time zone. It's not just a matter of you're in Australia, well, I'm going to hire someone in the UK, because when we go to bed, they wake up, right? So some of those criteria or some of those elements you really do need to think about. There's one aspect. The second aspect, which is probably one of the more important one, is when people traditionally hire, what do they look for? They look for skills and experience and qualifications. That typically leads to the candidate that looks right on paper, but potentially is wrong in person. Now, when there's a talent shortage, well, you might need to negotiate and say, well, what is more important? Is it more important that the person have all the right skills, all the right qualification? Or is it more important that they actually fit your culture, your brand, and what you're trying to drive? Because listen, my wife's been trying to change my behavior for many, many years, unsuccessfully so, right? So changing people's attitudes, changing people's behaviors is a lot harder. So I'd say maybe go for the candidates that might not fit all your skills, all your qualification requirements, because you can send them on courses, you can train them up on the job. What's much harder is finding the people that will fit your team and fit your culture. So bringing that element of selection right up front and identifying the key criteria for your teams behaviorally and so forth, I'd say that is a key and a unique way to actually find the right people for your organization, not just the job. So getting the candidate that potentially looks wrong, but is right. I'd say that is a key strategy that we've seen.
Great. Thank you, Rudy. And I encourage anyone who has a question for either Bob or Rudy to just pop your question into the Q&A module. I have one here, which I think is for Bob, a bit of a tricky one, potentially, but it's from an anonymous attendee who says, we are very new to AI. Have you got any creative ideas as to how to encourage staff to think about what AI could do to help them in their roles?
Yeah, you know what? I got bumped off. I'm back. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
We can.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's actually pretty easy, and that's a great question. It feeds right into what we're talking about is Chat GPT or just Google. I forgot what's the name of Google's AI. They've just changed its name. Yeah, Google changed its name, I think, for the third time. But just Google the word Google AI, and you in both places you just get, you just in both ChatGPT and Google, some of these other ones, they're just there to use, and just go to them like you'd use a search engine and just start talking to it. Just ask a question, give it a scenario like, hey, I'm thinking about this, and give it a scenario, and then just say, I would like from you to have this back. And it could be, I want bullets. I've asked it to give me, don't be shy. Ask it for, I want, short sentences. I want long sentences. I want bullets. I want this on whatever topic. I would have your team just play with it, and you could give it a couple scenarios. If you really wanted them to engage with it, give them a scenario or two, send them the link to ChatGPT or to Google AI and just go with it. And the cool thing is it gives you a response, and you can create different streams, but it gives you a response. You don't have to tell it again. It's in the conversation. You can go back to it weeks or days later and join that conversation and go, oh yeah, can you make that shorter or more punchy or whatever? And it'll stay on track. So you don't have to repeat yourself over and over.
I'll add to what you're saying, Bob. The way I've seen some HR teams use it is they actually upload some of their existing policies and procedures and ask ChatGPT to follow the same format of your previous policy and procedure and write a new policy for bullying and harassment according to Australian legislation. And so, or wherever it might be. So what ChatGPT will then do is it'll take your PDF, or it'll take your policy, it will look at the relevant Australian legislation, and it will quite nicely, as Bob said at the start, maybe not 100%, but let me tell you, it will save you days, if not weeks, in terms of writing a new policy and procedure. So that is a really cool and really unique way to actually use in the format and the templates of your business, how you can optimize some of these boilerplate tasks.
And it's so much better than staring, phase one, again, for us that are all on this call, that aren't engineers, that aren't off building a business around AI. It's so much better than staring at a blank page and going, okay, I got to start typing. Just ask it questions. It'll give you, and on your example, obviously, Rudy, you then have to send all that to, you got to either know what you're doing and review it, or send it to legal to review it, because sometimes you do get offbeat stuff out of this. And I think you always will, but yeah, it's, I would say just start engaging with it.
I mean, we used it, like I said, I'll use our own, drink our own champagne. We've got employees in 9 different countries in Compono. And so we had to write policies and procedures relevant for those jurisdictions. And what we did is we took our Aussie templates and said, okay, translate it or transpose it into Spanish employment law. And it was pretty close. It was pretty good. So it's a really neat way to just save a ton of time and start playing with it, for sure.
Yeah, you know what? I'll just kind of share really quickly. I'll give you the since we're on that topic. So I asked it, I said, we need a new term for HR leaders. It's becoming too much legal payroll, where it should be about culture, talent, organizational change, strategy. Keep the energy of keeping the energy of culture vibrant, the culture vibrant. It's about solving for organizational changes coming with introduction, with the coming of AI and work from anywhere. Give me some ideas in a few sentences for this role. And it gave me new titles, a whole set of new titles, and then some descriptions underneath that are actually some one or two are a little cheesy. But then I said, give me a marketing. Give me a paragraph or two that I could take to recruit with. Let me just, I'll read this to you. It says, are you passionate about shaping the future of work and driving organizational success through culture, talent, and strategic innovation? We are seeking visionary leaders to join our team, a team as culture and talent architect. In this role, you'll have a unique opportunity to design, cultivate a vibrant organizational culture that fosters innovation, collaboration, and employee engagement. A strategic partner, this is the part I like. As a strategic partner, you will lead initiatives to optimize talent management strategies, drive organizational change, and navigate the challenges and opportunities presented by AI integration and remote work dynamics. And then it has one more paragraph below it. But I fed a little bit. I said, here's some of the problem sets, and I need people to be leaders and drivers to it. And just did a really nice job.
Awesome. Well, look,
Hey,
I think
one more thing. Since we're talking about interfacing with the board at that level, and we're talking about moving from a cost center to a profit center, or that mindset as a leader, and showing, with all this change, how you're adding value. Stop everybody from calling it a head count. Just raise your hand every time the word head count comes up and go, let's just talent. Let's just call it talent. It's just dripping in those kind of things. I think is important for people to start thinking the right way.
Bob, thank you for your time. I did see a comment here by Pamela, which is, her biggest challenge is creating a cohesive culture as they have a large remote team, and goes on for another paragraph explaining the situation. I think I'll wrap up with this essentially saying, don't be afraid of technology. Don't use the tool that we've made available, where you can look at where your different areas and work areas are misaligned and aligned, and look for that standardization across the business. So this is the first step to essentially leading culture and leading your brand, I think, in using data and using statistics. So definitely jump on, use that QR code, jump on our technology, and start having a play and see what comes out for you guys. So Bob, really loved it. Might have to connect for some more discussion, more questions, but really appreciate your time, and thank you everybody for joining as well.
Thanks everybody for your time. Really appreciate it.